The morning light comes in differently when you are 90. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't demand anything from you. It simply arrives. I wake up before the sun most days, not because I have somewhere to go or someone waiting for me, but because sleep doesn't hold me the way it used to. At this age, your body lets go of many things. Deep sleep is one of them, but strangely so is fear. I sit at the edge of my bed for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. The house is still. No footsteps in the hallway. No voice calling my name. Just the ticking clock and the faint hum of time passing. There was a time when this silence would have crushed me, but not anymore. You see, people often ask me, sometimes gently, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with judgment, why didn't you remarry? You were still strong, still capable, still had years ahead. And I always smile, because the answer is not simple. It is not something you can explain in one sentence. It is a lifetime of love, loss, memories, and choices. And today, I want to tell you that story. I was not always alone. There was someone who filled this house with life. Her name was Margaret. She had a laugh that could turn even the darkest day into something soft and warm. She didn't just live in this house. She gave it a soul. The kitchen always smelled like something cooking, even when she wasn't in it. The windows always seemed brighter when she stood near them. We met when we were young, too young, perhaps, to understand what love really meant. But somehow we grew into it together. 58 years. That's how long we were married. 58 years of shared mornings, shared struggles, shared dreams. We built a life brick by brick. Not a perfect life, but a real one. We argued. Oh yes, we argued. About money, about raising children. About things that seem so small now, I can barely remember why they mattered so much. But we also forgave. And that is what made it last. People think love is about passion, about excitement, about butterflies. But after a certain point, love becomes something quieter. It becomes sitting together in silence and still feeling complete. When she passed away, the world didn't stop. That's the strange part. You expect something so big, so life-shattering, to make the earth pause, even just for a moment. But it doesn't. The sun still rises. People still go to work. Cars still pass by your house. And you sit there wondering how everything can continue when your world has ended. The first night after she was gone, I didn't sleep at all. I kept reaching out, half asleep, expecting to feel her beside me. And every time my hand touched the empty space, it felt like losing her all over again. Grief doesn't come all at once. It comes in waves. Sometimes it crashes over you without warning. Other times it sneaks in quietly, through a song, a smell, a memory you didn't ask for. I remember opening her closet weeks later. Her clothes were still there, hanging exactly as she left them. I stood there for a long time just looking, and I realized something in that moment. Love doesn't end when a person leaves this world. It changes form. It becomes memory. It becomes presence without a body. It becomes something you carry, not something you hold. People started talking to me about remarriage sooner than I expected. Well, you're still healthy, they said. You shouldn't spend the rest of your life alone. Everyone deserves companionship. And they were not wrong. Loneliness is real. At night, the silence can feel heavy. Meals taste different when you eat them alone. Even laughter feels incomplete when there's no one to share it with. But what people don't understand is this: there is a difference between being alone and feeling empty. And I was not empty. I was full of memories. Full of love that had not disappeared, only transformed. Full of a life that had already been deeply, completely lived. Remarrying, for me, was not about replacing loneliness. It would have been about replacing something that was never meant to be replaced. And that I could not do. I remember one afternoon sitting on the porch, watching the sun go down. A neighbor came by and sat next to me. "You ever think about finding someone again?" he asked. I looked at the sky for a long moment before answering. I already found someone, I said quietly. He didn't respond after that. And he didn't need to. You see, when you've experienced a love that lasted decades, a love that saw you through your youth, your struggles, your failures, your growth, you don't look for another beginning. You learn to live with the ending. Not because you are afraid, not because you are incapable, but because some stories are complete. And trying to start a new one doesn't always feel right. For some people, remarriage brings joy, healing, and companionship, and I respect that deeply. But for me, it felt like trying to write a new chapter in a book that had already reached its perfect conclusion. At 90 years old, you start to see life differently. You stop chasing things. You stop trying to prove anything to anyone. And most importantly, you stop ignoring your own truth. My truth was simple. I didn't need another love story. I needed to honor the one I already had. So no, I didn't remarry. Not because I couldn't, but because I chose not to. And that choice brought me peace. But this is only the beginning of my story. Because the real question is not why I didn't remarry. It's what I learned about love, loneliness, and life after loss. Loneliness is a strange companion. It doesn't knock on your door. It doesn't announce itself. It simply sits beside you. At first, after Margaret was gone, I didn't even recognize it. People came and went. There were condolences, warm meals, kind words, gentle hands on my shoulder. You're not alone, they told me. And in those early days, they were right. But grief has a way of outlasting sympathy. Slowly, the visits became less frequent. The phone calls became shorter. The world, as it always does, moved forward, and I stayed behind. The hardest part of losing someone after so many years is not just their absence. It's the absence of routine. You see, when you live with someone for decades, your lives become intertwined in ways you don't even notice. Morning tea wasn't just tea. It was conversation. Dinner wasn't just food. It was connection. Even silence wasn't really silence. But now, everything became separate. I would pour 2 cups of tea out of habit. Then I'd stand there staring at the second cup before quietly pouring it back. That moment, that small, ordinary moment, hurt more than anything dramatic ever could. People think loneliness is about being physically alone. It's not. It's about missing the person who understood your unspoken words. The one who knew when you were tired without asking. The one who could read your silence like a book. That kind of connection cannot be recreated easily. And at 90, I wasn't interested in starting from the beginning again. There were nights, many nights, when the silence felt unbearable. I would sit in the living room, the lights off, just listening. Not to anything specific, just listening. Hoping, perhaps, to hear something familiar. A voice, a footstep, a memory that sounded real enough to touch. But of course nothing came. That's when loneliness becomes something deeper. Not just the absence of people, but the presence of longing. I remember one particular night. The rain was falling heavily outside. It reminded me of a night many years ago when Margaret and I had lost power in the house. We lit candles, sat close together, and told stories from our childhoods. We laughed like children ourselves. That memory came back to me so vividly that night. I could almost see her sitting across from me again. Almost. And that, almost, is the cruelest part of memory. Now, let me be honest with you. There were moments, real moments, when I considered remarriage. I am not made of stone. I felt the emptiness. I felt the longing for companionship. I felt the human need to share life with someone. There were even people who showed interest. Kind women, good women, people who had also experienced loss and were looking for connection again, and I respected them deeply. I even had conversations, simple ones at first. A cup of tea, a shared story, a polite smile. And for a brief moment, I wondered, could I do this again? But every time I asked myself that question, something inside me hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of honesty. because I realized something important. I wasn't looking for someone new. I was looking for something familiar, and those are not the same thing. You cannot recreate a 58-year bond in a few conversations. You cannot replace shared history with polite introductions. You cannot rebuild decades of understanding starting from zero, and it wouldn't have been fair. Not to them, and not to me. Some people told me, love grows again. And I believe that. Truly I do. The human heart is capable of loving more than once. It is resilient. It is generous. But love also depends on timing. And at my stage in life, I was no longer looking to build something. I was learning how to carry what already existed. There's another truth people don't often talk about. Remarriage is not just about companionship. It's about compromise. It's about adjusting to new habits, new personalities, new expectations. And at 90, after living a certain way for so long, change becomes heavier. Not impossible, but heavier. I had already lived a full life of compromise, growth, and adjustment. I wasn't tired of people. I was simply at peace with myself. Loneliness over time began to change. It didn't disappear, but it softened. It became less like a storm and more like a quiet presence. Something that sat beside me, but no longer overwhelmed me. I started finding comfort in small things. The sound of birds in the morning, the warmth of sunlight through the window, the simple act of remembering without breaking. And slowly, I began to understand something powerful. Being alone does not mean your life is empty. It means your life is yours. I started talking to Margaret in my own way. Not out loud, perhaps, but in my thoughts. When I made tea, I'd think, "You'd say this needs more sugar." When I saw something beautiful, I'd imagine her reaction. It may sound strange to some people, but to me it felt natural. Because love, when it is real, does not disappear. It adapts. One day, my granddaughter asked me a question. "Don't you feel lonely, Grandpa?" I looked at her and smiled. "Yes," I said. "But loneliness is not always a bad thing," as she looked confused. So I explained, loneliness teaches you who you are when no one else is around. And that is something I didn't want to lose. If I had remarried, perhaps I would have had companionship, but I might have lost this quiet understanding of myself, this acceptance, this peace. So yes, loneliness was part of my journey, a big part, a painful part, but also a meaningful one. Because it taught me that love is not just about having someone beside you. It's about carrying someone within you. And as I grew older, I stopped asking, "Why am I alone?" and started understanding, I am not alone in the ways that truly matter. But there is still more to this story, because loneliness was only one piece. There were also regrets, memories I wished I had handled differently, and lessons that came too late. There is something no one prepares you for in old age. It's not the physical pain. It's not the slowing down. It's not even the loneliness. It's the memories that come back with clarity you never had before. At 90 years old, you begin to see your life not as moments, but as a complete story. And when you see the whole story, you start to notice the parts you wish you had written differently. I loved Margaret. There is no doubt about that. But love alone does not mean perfection. And if I am being honest with you, truly honest, there are things I regret. Things I wish I had done differently. Words I wish I had never said. Moments I wish I had not taken for granted. Time I wish I had used more wisely. When you are young, you think time is endless. You assume there will always be another day to say, "I'm sorry." Another chance to show appreciation. Another moment to be kinder, more patient, more present. But life doesn't work that way. And neither does love. I remember the small arguments, the ones that felt so important at the time. Arguments about money, about responsibilities, about things that, looking back now, seem almost meaningless. There was a time I came home late from work, tired and frustrated. Margaret had been waiting for me. Dinner was cold. She said something simple, something like, "You could have called." And I responded with irritation instead of understanding. We argued that night over something so small. But what I remember most is not the argument itself. It's the way she went quiet afterward. That silence was not anger. It was hurt. And I didn't recognize it at the time. Years later, I can see it clearly. She wasn't upset about the dinner. She wasn't upset about the time. She was upset because she cared, because she wanted to feel considered. And I failed to see that. This is one of the hardest truths I've had to accept. Sometimes we hurt the people we love, not because we don't care, but because we assume they will always be there. There were also moments I chose work over time with her. I told myself I was doing it for the family, for our future, and maybe part of that was true. But there were evenings I could have come home earlier, and didn't. There were weekends I could have spent with her, and chose something else. At the time, those choices felt small. Now they feel significant. Because when someone is gone, you don't remember the hours you worked. You remember the moments you missed. I remember one particular day, she had asked me to go for a walk with her. Just a simple walk. And I told her I was too busy. "I'll go with you tomorrow," I said. Tomorrow. That word feels so certain when you say it. But life does not promise tomorrow. We did go for a walk the next day. But I still think about the day I said no. Not because it changed everything, but because it represents something deeper. A pattern, a mindset, the belief that time could always be postponed. And then there were the words I didn't say. I love you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for everything you do. I felt those things deeply, but I didn't always express them. Not because I didn't want to, but because I assumed she already knew. And maybe she did, but knowing is not the same as hearing. After she passed, I found a small note in one of her books. It was simple, just a few words written in her handwriting. I hope he knows how much I loved him. That note broke something inside me. Because in that moment I realized something painful. If she had to hope I knew, then maybe I didn't show it enough. Regret is not loud. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It shows up in quiet moments, in memories that replay differently each time, in the understanding that comes too late. But here's the truth I've come to accept. Regret is not meant to punish you. It's meant to teach you. If I had remarried, I would have carried those regrets into a new relationship. And that wouldn't have been fair, because I wasn't looking to start over. I was still learning from what had already happened. Instead of trying to replace the past, I chose to honor it, to sit with those regrets, to understand them, to let them shape the way I see love. Because love is not just about what you feel, it's about what you show. It's about presence, attention, kindness in small moments. It's about choosing each other again and again, even when life gets difficult. If I could go back, I wouldn't change everything. Our life was real. It was beautiful in its own imperfect way. But I would change the small things, the tone of my voice in certain moments, the times I chose distraction over connection, the words I left unspoken. And maybe that's why I didn't remarry, because I wasn't trying to escape my past. I was trying to understand it, to learn from it, to carry it with honesty instead of running from it. At 90, you realize something important. Life is not about being perfect. It's about being aware. And awareness often comes with regret, but it also comes with wisdom. So if you are listening to my story right now, and you still have someone in your life, don't wait. Don't assume. Don't postpone the things that matter. Say the words. Take the walk. Be present. Because one day those moments will be all you have left. As for me, I carry my regrets, but I also carry gratitude. Gratitude for the years we had, for the love we shared, for the lessons I learned, even if some came too late. But my story doesn't end with regret. Because over time something changed inside me. Regret slowly turned into understanding, and understanding turned into peace. And those lessons changed the way I see love forever. There comes a time in life when the noise inside you begins to settle. Not because everything is perfect, but because you stop fighting what is. For a long time after Margaret passed, my mind was restless. Memories, regrets, loneliness, they would all take turns visiting me, sometimes gently, sometimes all at once. But as the years passed, something unexpected happened. The storm inside me began to quiet. It didn't happen overnight. Peace rarely does. It came slowly, in small, almost unnoticeable moments. A morning where I didn't feel the heaviness in my chest. An afternoon where a memory made me smile instead of ache. An evening where silence felt comforting instead of empty. I started to understand something I had never truly understood before. Peace is not something you find outside. It's something you allow within. At 90, your world becomes smaller in many ways. You don't travel as much. You don't chase ambitions. You don't try to prove anything anymore. And in that smaller world, you begin to notice things you once ignored. I began to appreciate the simple rhythm of my days, waking up slowly without urgency, making my tea without distraction, sitting by the window, watching the world move without needing to be part of its rush. There was a time when I feared this kind of life. I thought being alone meant being forgotten, but I was wrong. Being alone gave me space to remember everything more clearly. I remembered Margaret, not just in moments of loss, but in moments of joy. I remembered the way she used to laugh at things that weren't even that funny. The way she would hum while cooking. The way she looked at me, even in our older years, like I was still the man she fell in love with. Those memories stopped hurting and started healing. I realized something powerful during those quiet years. Love does not need a physical presence to remain alive. It lives in the way you think, in the way you speak, in the way you carry yourself. Margaret was no longer beside me, but she was still within me, and that changed everything. People often think that remarriage is the only solution to loneliness. And for many, it is a beautiful choice. But for me, peace came not from replacing what I lost, but from embracing what remained. I didn't feel incomplete anymore. I didn't feel like something was missing, because I understood that my life was not broken. It had simply changed. There's a difference. When something is broken, you try to fix it. When something has changed, you learn to live with it. And sometimes that new version of life holds its own kind of beauty. I started doing things I never paid attention to before. I began writing small notes to myself, reflections, thoughts, memories. Not for anyone else, just for me. I would sit outside in the evenings, watching the sky change colors, and instead of thinking about what I had lost, I started appreciating what I still had. Time, breath, awareness. At 90, every day feels like a gift, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, honest way. You wake up and you realize, I am still here, and that alone is enough. I also stopped fearing death. That may sound strange to some people, but when you've lived a full life, when you've loved deeply, when you've experienced both joy and pain, death no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like a continuation. Not something to rush toward, but not something to fear either. I often think about the idea of seeing Margaret again, not with desperation, not with sadness, but with a quiet sense of acceptance. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, that's okay too. Because what we had already existed, and nothing can take that away. This is something younger people often struggle to understand. They see life as something that must always be filled with people, with activity, with noise. But there is a certain kind of richness in stillness. Stillness allows you to hear your own thoughts, to understand your own heart, to accept your life exactly as it is. And in that acceptance, there is peace. I no longer asked myself, what's next? Instead, I started asking, what is now? And now was enough. If I had remarried, perhaps my days would have been different. More conversation, more shared routines, more companionship. But I might have missed this version of life, this quiet clarity, this deep understanding of myself. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. Because at the end of life, peace matters more than anything else. Not success, not recognition, not even companionship. Peace, the kind of peace that allows you to sit alone and feel complete. So no, I did not remarry. Not because I was holding on to the past in a painful way, but because I had made peace with it, and that peace became my companion. But there is still one final part of my story, because everything I've shared, love, loss, loneliness, regret, peace, it all leads to one final truth. One message I want to leave behind. If you've listened to my story this far, then I want to thank you. Not for your time, but for your willingness to feel. Because stories like this are not just meant to be heard, they are meant to be understood. At 90 years old, when I look back at my life, I don't see it in years. I see it in moments. Small moments. Ordinary moments. Moments that didn't seem important at the time, but became everything later. A shared cup of tea. A quiet walk. A simple, "How was your day?" A hand held without a reason. These are the things that stay. Not the money you earned. Not the titles you held. Not the things you worried about. And if there is one thing, just one thing, I want you to understand before it's too late. It is this: love is not something you should delay. We live as if we have time, endless time. We say things like, "I'll do it tomorrow. I'll say it later. I'll make time when things calm down." But life doesn't wait for the perfect moment, and love cannot survive on intentions alone. If you care about someone, show it. Not in big, dramatic ways, but in small, consistent ones. Listen when they speak. Be present when you are with them. Choose kindness, especially when it's difficult. Because one day, there will be no more later. I used to think love was about staying together. Now I understand. It's about how you treat each other while you are together. If I could go back, not to change everything, but to change a few things, I would be more patient. I would listen more. I would say, "I love you," without waiting for the right moment. I would take that walk every single time. But life doesn't give us the chance to go back. It only gives us the chance to do better now. So if you are watching this, and you still have someone in your life, don't waste that gift. Call them. Sit with them. Laugh with them. Even if it's just for a few minutes. Because one day, those minutes will become memories. And those memories will become everything. As for me, I did not remarry. Not because I rejected love, but because I had already lived it fully. My story is not about loss. It's about completeness. I loved someone for 58 years. I learned from that love. I grew from it. I carry it with me even now. And that is enough. People often think happiness comes from having more people, more experiences, more time. But at the end of life, happiness comes from something much simpler, knowing that you loved and were loved deeply. That is the real wealth of life. So don't wait. Don't assume. Don't take the people in your life for granted. Because one day, you will sit where I am sitting now, looking back, remembering, feeling. And in that moment, you will not wish for more time. You will wish you had used the time you had differently. Make sure that when that day comes, you don't carry regret. You carry peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing, I gave my love fully. I showed up. I didn't wait. That is the message I want to leave behind. Not about why I didn't remarry, but about why love should never be delayed. If my story touched you in any way, then don't just listen. Act. Tell someone you love them today, not tomorrow, not later, today. Because in the end, that is all that really matters. And if you ever wonder whether one love can be enough for a lifetime, I am here to tell you yes, it can. And sometimes it already is. The truth is, my story was never about refusing to remarry. It was about understanding what love really means. At 90, I don't measure life by how many years I lived, but by how deeply I loved. And I was lucky, because I experienced a kind of love that didn't fade with time, didn't disappear with loss, and didn't need to be replaced. If you are still searching for love, I hope you find it. If you already have it, I hope you protect it. And if you have lost it, I hope you understand this love doesn't end. It stays with you, quietly, forever. So don't wait. Don't hold back. Don't assume there will always be another chance, because one day there won't be. Live your love. Speak your love. Show your love today. And when your time comes, may you look back, not with regret, but with peace. Because in the end, a life filled with love is a life that was never empty.